thank you for joining us, and formal welcome again to our Wellbeing at Home event this evening on a very dark evening. It's just feels like it's really crept up on us, this weather, the winter. So anyway, big virtual hug to all of our attendees, and nice to see your names and faces. As I always say, very heartwarming, and a big welcome if any of you are joining us for the first time. And I hope you enjoy this event and come back to hold others that we hold in the future. We do them quite regularly. So these events are all about empowering you to have as much information as you can to take control of your health and well-being, and really focus on prevention. And I'm going to be a little bit controversial here and say so that you're not totally reliant on the medical profession and the pharmaceutical companies to keep you well. So, and we all understand that sometimes we need to go down that road and that route. But in my view, as a society here in the West, our government and the medical profession, and I'm generalizing here, doesn't talk enough about prevention. So here we are doing our tiny little bit, as much as we can, to get that information out as clearly as we can, so that we can empower you all to lead happy and healthy lives, as we say. So on that note, we are here with Dr. Mathew today to talk about Ayurveda. Now, I'm sure many of you came to his talk. He was one of our first talkers when we started, our first speakers, I should say, when we started our Wellbeing at Home sessions, almost 2 years ago now, but hasn't that flown by? So, and he was a very popular speaker because he demystified Ayurveda, and Dr. Mathew and I were talking a little bit earlier about Ayurveda and how a lot of people are kind of scared of it because it's this very ancient holistic health system science, but it's complex, and Dr. Mathew has a way of simplifying it for us as much as he can. So Dr. Mathew, thank you for being with us and welcome. Thank you. And now I first met you many years ago now at the Ananda in the Himalayas, right? I think I was lucky enough to go there twice, and I met you twice there. And Dr. Mathew used to be a resident doctor at the Ananda, and since then he has been in the UK for the last 5 years practicing here. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background? What made you go into Ayurvedic medicine as well?
Yes, definitely. So thank you everyone, firstly, for joining in, and thanks especially to Stella and Wellbeing Escapes for inviting me for this talk. So my background, right? So we have a family tradition in our family, like my grandfather's brother was an Ayurvedic eye doctor. This was a long time ago, and this his tradition was not followed afterwards in the family. And when I had the opportunity to go into higher studies, I looked at this option because of this tradition, as well as everybody in the house was either a pharmacist or a doctor or a nursing professional. So I chose something which I felt I was connected to. And yes, that took me on this journey, and I'm right now here in UK. During the study also, I've undergone, I don't know if many of you know, the study of Ayurveda at the moment in India is like any other medical education. We go through the usual stuffs that we need to learn before we treat anyone. So anatomy, physiology in its all extent, including dissecting cadavers and bones and everything. So the whole aspect of it. And you then go into the depths of understanding the philosophy of life, and then going into herbs and treatments, prevention, detox, cleansing, different aspects which are very elaborately described in Ayurvedic textbooks. So that itself is not sufficient to get into a clinical practice in Ayurveda. After that, I had to undergo supervised practice in different places all over Kerala, mainly where I come from. And then I continued practicing all over India, from where I met Stella in Rishikesh up in the north. I'm from the south of India, and now I'm here. Yeah. Did I answer the question?
You did. Thank you. And I think I just want to raise this point because we were talking earlier, and as a little experiment, I Googled what is Ayurveda, and I was horrified to see that WikiPeaks, what they call Wikipedia, talks of it as being like quack medicine. So I was absolutely horrified to read that, because it's an ancient science, right? Holistic medical system. And also Ayurvedic doctors have to go through regular, as you say, medical training, like, allopathic training as well before you do the Ayurvedic. So it felt, I just have to share that with them, because I was really upset to read that. It's almost like they're trying to discredit it, and move away from like holistic health practice. But just talk to us in terms of Ayurveda, like the main principles, because you said, detox, herbs, everything else, but holistically it's about balance, right?
Yes, definitely. And it realizes that every person needs to maintain their own balance rather than looking at what the majority sort of fits in terms of different names of disease or boxes. We all have our own kind of balance, and we decide our activity, food, and lifestyle routine based on that, so that we can maintain, while we are also taking care of general aspects of hygiene, exercise, all of that. We also have certain responsibility of, in a way, listening to ourselves. Don't ignore ourselves and look at the trending health trends and just have turmeric, aloe vera, etc., etc. Instead of doing that, look at your body, feel how your stomach is after eating something, how you sleep is after encountering some form of stress factor, etc. So it's about that uniqueness. And I think I need to answer that Wikipedia sort of comment. I think there is some genuine reason behind it, particularly because of the kind of training Ayurvedic doctors get and the socio-economic situation in rural India. A lot of Ayurvedic doctors actually practice as regular modern GPs and doctors in India. They prescribe antibiotics, and I know actually a few doctors who conduct surgeries as well. And they are Ayurvedic doctors. They haven't got any surgery, higher studies, or any extra knowledge that nowadays modern surgeons have. So they do this bit because of the socioeconomic situation. There are no doctors in like 100 or 200 kilometer radius. So it is the situation there, and a lot of Ayurvedic doctors don't actually get to practice pure Ayurveda, unfortunately. As the situation is changing, as the overall healthcare system improves. And because of this situation, I think there are talks of giving bridging courses for both Ayurvedic doctors and allopathic doctors in India to do a 2-year course of some kind and then bridge onto each other, so that you can actually work together in a same institution kind of setup, because you are pretty much dealing with the same issue, health. So that's the reason why Wikipedia might have picked up that, but it's not, the science itself is not discredited in any way, because it has lasted so long. I don't think many sciences or healthcare techniques or anything has lasted so long, so well, and still being actively practiced. So I don't think it's about the science itself. Going back to your question about balance, we know it's a vague idea that we need to maintain balance. So the main purpose of understanding Ayurveda is to give you simple sort of guidelines to understand what is balance, and then sort of give you practical methods of how to maintain that balance based on what's happening within your body, mainly related to your digestion, mainly related to how your body responds to external stimulus and changes in, say, the weather changing, what kind of weak points or ailments tend to appear easily for you. All these are taken into consideration. It's quite logical when you actually try to understand it in depth. So my aim is to give you a little bit more idea about doshas, which is our main sort of tool that we use to analyze the balance, and then give you some tips to take care of each dosha according to what you feel is predominant. It's not anyway a medical sort of consultation and treatment advice, but it's more like shining a bit of light into some place where it feels unclear or a bit confusing.
Yeah. Okay, well, before we start on doshas, because we will talk about doshas, you're currently doing a master's in psychology, right, as an Ayurvedic doctor, which I found fascinating. And when I asked you why, can you share with everybody why you've decided to do that?
Right. So my reason of doing psychology was, there are multiple reasons. One of the reasons, I always was fascinated by the way our mind, consciousness, cognitive functions, all of this works. It's quite interesting for me when I started studying Ayurveda. Also, what attracted me most is that the mind and the person's whole is kept in view even when we are treating a skin issue or a headache or any particular symptom. So a whole person comes into perspective. And I think the one of the very few modern sciences that doesn't actually completely go away from the person and focus on just one symptom, one particular specialty is, I think, psychology. The only other person who would know the whole body will be somebody who checks your blood test and writes the report. They would know a little bit more about the whole body. Psychology understands that only one way of looking at mind, say through cognitive behavioral thing, which we are doing a lot nowadays, is not actually sufficient. It understands that we have to look at all aspects related to evolution, biology of the body, developmental aspects, childhood experience, etc. So I like that holistic view of it. And through my experience of practicing from last 10 to 12 years, I've seen that the need of going into that with a bit more sort of knowledge and experience, I feel could help my Ayurvedic practice further. So I'm not sort of exactly sure how my practice is going to change with this experience, but I'm definitely going to apply as I complete it, some aspect of it into my practice as well.
It's interesting. It's interesting you're doing that, because it shows that somebody's mental state and their mind really does affect their physical health. And as you were saying earlier to me, that so many of your clients have chronic diseases, which can be massively affected through their mental state. Anyway, we'll move on now to doshas. Who managed to, as usual, folks, feel free to put comments and questions in chat. But who managed to do their dosha questionnaire? Did anyone manage to do that with the link? Did we have people? No one managed to do that. That's okay. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about the doshas then. And oh, Charlie did. Alice. Okay, so there's quite a lot of people did. Okay, a few people did. So let's talk about the doshas and what they are, please.
Right. So I think before I just talk about the doshas, I think it's important to understand that the basic premises of Ayurveda exist in this idea that we are part of nature, and everything around us can influence our health, and at the same time if understood properly, we can use them for treating and mending issues that we are facing with our health and balance. So that's the basic idea of Ayurveda. And from that point of view, we needed something which is understandable way of categorizing things around us. So now we know, there are many elements, more than 100 elements, and we learn it in chemistry. And those are understood as basic, somewhat basic building blocks of everything around us, including our body. In ancient times, they were limited in their equipments and what kind of, somebody's asking a question, Erling. I think it was in the email.
It was on the newsletters. It was on the newsletters that linked you to this. It's on there. It's actually on the page of the event, but I can share that later. It's fine. Let's continue. Yeah.
Right. So the basic elements that ancient time, what they understood was everything around us is made of 5 basic elements: air, space, fire, water, and earth. Now, that was because of the limited amount of equipments that they had. And you can see this common aspect of 5 basic elements in many of the ancient sciences, whether it is Chinese medicine or Tibetan philosophy. All of these have 5. The names are usually different, but the number sticks to 5. And the reason is 2,000 to 5,000 years ago, the only equipments that they had to analyze things around us was our 5 senses. So if we have to understand something in front of us, we will either smell it, taste it, touch it, and feel it, or smell it. So all the 5 senses is what we use. And we started analyzing things in 5 different ways. And that morphed into what we understand as the basic concept of 5 elements. So when we talk about elements in Ayurveda, or say that air element is say out of balance, or air element is the factor we are looking at, it has nothing to do with oxygen or gases or vacuum spaces filled in your body. It has nothing to do with even air in our lungs. It has everything to do with our sense of touch. Touch is how we understand there is air in front of us. When we speak, we feel it on our lips, or you can see things moving, but at the same time, if you don't feel it, you won't understand the concept of air. And that touch and the feeling is connected to air more than oxygen or any gases. If we come to other elements also, like space is more connected to sound and how we understand direction and where the sound is coming from. Fire is related to our vision, ability to see energy or light energy. And the other 2, one is related to taste, the water element, and earth is related to smell. So 5 element theory is the basic idea of bringing our body and the environment around us together. Now it's too complicated that is also too complicated to apply in our everyday life. Like if you have a piece of fruit, there is water, there is aspects of fire, maybe it is a bit acidic. There are so many different things and it becomes too complicated. That was simplified based on how we could apply it. And then the doshas was formed. So the idea of doshas is bringing together these elements to apply it practically. So the single purpose of dosha itself is to simplify. And if doshas are not simple enough, then that's totally our fault. The way I explain, or any Ayurvedic doctors try to explain it, it is supposed to be very simple. It brings together similar elements. So the first dosha, we call it Vata. In Sanskrit, it means Vata, V-A-T-A, Vata. It means air-like. And in effect, we are looking at the presence of element air and space and all the factors associated with it, all the functions in the body, all the qualities of dryness or coldness. Different qualities are there, which I can explain. The second dosha, Pitta, 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 that is representing fire and water, simplifying the idea of fire and water. It's again nothing to do with burning fire and water, because fire and water doesn't go together. One extinguishes the other. But this is about the idea of transformation. Fire represents a change, and the flowing nature of water, those coming together in our transformative functions happening in the body, the metabolic activities, digestion, hormones, functions of circulation, in our mind, all kinds of thinking, logical analysis, all of these things which are transforming, we bring it together into the idea of Pitta, which is representing the element fire and water. And the last one, Kapha, Kapha. Kapha is representing the remaining two elements, water and earth. Water is present in both, in Pitta and Kapha. That's our way of understanding. But by effect, Kapha is representing that water and earth represents nourishment. In the nature also, we see these two are essential for other organisms to grow, plants or any other organism. So similarly, in our body, it represents nourishment, growth. It represents anything which is heavy and has a structure to it. So our body tissue build up, our any kind of repair happening in the body, breathing, respiratory function, any kind of lubrication within our body, in our mind, any tendency to hold, or that sticky nature of water and earth together helps our memory, forming kind of memories that we hold on to, all the factors which are connected to calmness, groundedness, a bit of slow kind of activities or responses that we do, they all are categorized together as kapha. So first thing that comes to mind, and I want to clarify, is that the three doshas, even though some of you might have done the test and found out that this is the dosha, doshas are not about fitting a person into a particular box. It doesn't mean that you are a Vata person and that's it. Doshas are all about understanding that health is a balance between all the functions in the body. And an Ayurvedic point of view is that health is a balance of the three doshas, because that represents all the functions in the body. Vata representing movements. Air represents that lightness and movement. So your body, it can translate as functions related to bones and joints, circulation, any kind of fast thinking, intuitive thinking, impulsive nature, anything physically or in the mind which moves fast, we will bring it together as a function of movement or as an effect of air and space, Vata. Pitta represents, as I mentioned earlier itself, it is transformation, change. And the biggest change is our digestion. So functions related to digestion, hormones, analysis, thinking, logical analysis, all of that comes as Pitta, and Kapha represents nourishment and growth. When these three are in balance, that's considered as proper health. Then why do we have to do this tests and questionnaires and try to understand what's our body type? It's because of this unique concept that everybody is different. It's not that unique. Everybody knows. We all are different. So we have to first understand what's our natural balance. And that's the beauty of Ayurveda. It doesn't actually define that three dosha balance is, it's what we all have to aim to achieve, but it doesn't say that that is the only healthy state possible. It says that the direction, the path towards achieving balance is health. It's not actually a destination. Health is basically that path. Wherever you start, it doesn't matter. You have to aim towards the balance. So if you are experiencing a certain symptom, for example, say you're seeing that you feel cold very easily, not just in this cold weather, but in summertime also, you can feel cold. You know your circulation is a bit weaker. And you also know that from popular understanding that salads are very healthy. I use this example because it's very easy to explain. Salads are very healthy, and you will have salads quite regularly. And you might also be feeling bloatedness and other symptoms increasing with that diet. What we say in Ayurveda is that salads are definitely nutritious and they are holding a lot of nutrition, which will be good for everybody. But being a person who has a tendency towards Vata, which we understand through that symptoms of dryness and feeling cold, you will benefit more from a diet which is warming, which includes spices, which includes more cooked food rather than having salads more often. And that direction is all about, that's the most important aspect in Ayurveda. It's not where you start. And we all start in different place. That's where we have to identify our dosha predominance. And that's where everybody starts. That's the starting point. And the journey after that is unique based on where you are.
So that's really interesting about the doshas, because is it true then that, most of us have one predominant dosha? Okay, most of us. I'm sure there are some people who are perfectly balanced. They're probably quite rare, but most of us have one predominant one. And is it true that we are born with that predominant dosha, or does that predominant dosha come from it's self-inflicted to our lifestyle?
So the predominant dosha is not actually decided based on your environment. It is decided at birth.
Okay.
We call it your prakriti or your nature. Now, Ayurveda does explain that it's not based on just genetics. So it's not based on matraja or motherly and fatherly qualities. It's not just a mix of that. It also understands that the time of birth, the climate into which the child is born, the diet of mother and father prior to the fertilization, the aspects which are connected to mind and emotions during the stages of pregnancy, all of this contributes. But once you are born, that is your prakriti, that's your nature. Most of the time, it's not very easy to identify a child's body type. I don't attempt that, which is not very purposeful. I think the idea is to say that the aim is not to fight with your body type. The body type defines you, and it defines your strengths as well. It's not an imbalance. Ayurveda has a different concept for imbalance caused by external aspects of lifestyle, stress, external environment, including microbes, etc., etc. So if any of these causes an imbalance, most of the time, the easy way to understand is if you have a certain body type, predominant one, like, for example, we again take the example of Vata, an air imbalance. And if your illness, external factors are also increasing it, it's fairly easy to identify and deal with that, because you are quite used to how to maintain your diet and lifestyle, because that's your nature, that's your body type. It's mostly hard to deal with something which has changed suddenly due to an external factor, and your choices will then conflict with what is actually good for you. And it takes some effort from, even when I am consulting and explaining, it takes some effort to explain that, no, maybe for a few days or a few weeks, you might have to change your normal routine of what has worked for until now may not be the best for you right now. So that kind of imbalance is known as Vikriti. Vikriti is what has gone out of balance. And Vikriti is always what Ayurvedic doctors treat. So when I say treat, if somebody has an existing symptom and come to me, I'm treating their Vikriti or an imbalance. It's not their body type. Most of the time when I talk to people about Ayurvedic lifestyle and taking care of health and preventing illnesses, we are focusing on your body type, what you have analyzed with your questionnaire. And that will be suitable to prevent ailments. We're focusing on what you understand comes through how your body behaves normally. If it has gone out of balance, it's slightly different situation. So you have to adjust your diet lifestyle according to situation. We are not exactly talking about that in this chat. I think it's more about
No,
maintenance and prevention.
yeah, I mean, but I just want to take an example of what you just said, just so that I can make it clear in my mind and hopefully for everybody else. So, for example, I am, well, we all know, you know, I'm a Pitta, very much a Pitta, predominantly. So you have advised me in the past not to eat, you know, certain foods which aggravate my Pitta, which is my inherent dosha. Okay, so don't, you know, you're saying, Stella, don't eat that spicy food that you love so much. Don't eat all those things that you like. Don't eat them, pretty much. Anyway, no, I'm joking. But you're, you know, you give me advice around that. And that is just so that I can keep myself in balance and prevent illness. Okay. Now, if God forbid I get sick and I have a chronic disease, so I say I become diabetic or I get something happens to me, that is, I have already come out of balance from my normal dosha state. And then the advice you give me then will be completely different to what you've told me about just staying within my own.
Yes, it will be very
Okay.
different, because
Okay.
I think it's also maybe interesting. I don't know if somebody already knows a little bit of Ayurveda, I can little bit go into the idea of how a disease just originates very quickly from an Ayurvedic point of view. Usually by the time we approach anyone for help, once we have a symptom, Ayurveda understands that you are already at stage 4 or 5 of the disease. So disease progression starts much, much earlier before we understand it as a certain illness with very understandable symptoms. The first symptom in Ayurveda, as the first stage of disease formation, is just craving. And the craving is mostly, if you very carefully observe, would be towards the opposite. So if we are, say, stressed, and if we want something which is grounding, and something that can cause heaviness, we will go towards chocolate and oily things, and things which actually ground but doesn't ground us that much, which is processed and with lots of sugar. But our aim, our natural instinct tells us that we need to have something which is satisfying and grounding in nature. So that is the first stage of a disease itself in an Ayurvedic point of view. The second and third, I'm not going into depth. Up till second and third, most of the symptoms of any disease appears within your digestive system. It can be bloatedness, acidity, feeling of uneasiness, pain, cramps, any form of symptoms, but it restricts itself to the through the main sort of channel of interaction with the external environment. We are literally a pipe, and externally our skin interacts with the environment, internally our gut interacts with the food and everything that we consume. So first symptoms always appear there. Up till stage 3, we normally don't actually go for any help. We understand, what do we feel like? Okay, I'm not feeling very well. I'll have a soup and eat less and rest, or I might skip a meal. These are things which we naturally do. Up till stage 3, that is sufficient. And with Prakriti, what happens is, most of the time we are addressing that within that first 3 stages. When it goes out of balance, we understand that the body is systemically out of balance and looks for opportunity. So if, for example, Pitta, Stella used the example Pitta. So Pitta is out of balance. Sometimes it can create a feeling of burning sensation, acidic tendency. If it goes too out of balance, it can create feeling sort of pain or any kind of like acidic symptoms. If it is into stage 4, it's just looking for other opportunities, where in modern terms, we would say it's looking for an opportunity to start showing symptoms of inflammation. So there will be redness, burning sensation, heat, and it will be based on the person's past kind of activities, experience, injuries, etc. It can happen in small joints. It can happen in the anywhere in the body. So it can appear as UTI. It can appear as other inflammation symptoms, etc. That has gone out of balance. Even if it is Stella's Prakriti, it is still gone out of balance. The treatment will be slightly more different because you have to approach it through diet. You might also need some extra help from herbs and specific treatments. That's where the doctor usually applies his experience and knowledge to heal issues. And then in stage 5, it will be not just a symptom. At stage 4, there is no tissue change. You will experience pain, you will experience discomfort. But if you go for a blood test, or if your GP checks you, you will probably be said that we'll do another test. There's nothing wrong right now. That's actually stage 4. There is definitely something wrong. You are the best person to know that there is something wrong happening, but it's not easy to identify. It doesn't create tissue related change. And 5th stage is called sthana samsraya, where it's situated in tissues. It has targeted certain tissues, and then there is change. After that, transformation treatment is slightly slower. You can easily identify it through tests or visible sort of symptoms. That's where Vikriti is treated, and Prakriti is more about understanding what kind of everyday routine you have to maintain to prevent any of these.
Okay. Okay, guys, it's such a fascinating. I was just thinking as you were talking, we could go on for hours on this. I've got so many questions. I don't know where to start. So I've got a couple of questions here we just address, and then I want to talk about how we can apply some basic Ayurvedic practices into our daily lives. Once we find out what our dosha is, so one has to go and do that little questionnaire. So Kay says, I am Vata and Pitta. How do I deal with both? So if you're like equally, have 2 prevalent doshas,
it is very, very common to have a combination of doshas because we use the names of doshas for our ease of applying. Vata and Pitta are not 2 conflicting different types. Vata indicates certain tendency for dry and cold nature. So it means that circulation is affected. There could be some effect on inside the gut or anywhere in the body expressing itself as dryness. And Pitta would indicate some aspects of acidic or inflammation tendency. It's quite normal to have both, and it's very easy to focus on both without contradicting each other. It's not a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of concept. One of the first classes with Ayurveda in my college, and the lecturer asked us what is 1 + 1, and we all laughed and said 2. He said, as long as you keep thinking 1 + 1 is 2, it'll be difficult to understand Ayurveda. You have to come up with an alternative answer, and we didn't. But he said 1 + 1 can be a big one. So as we start thinking a little bit differently, then we'll be able to understand that they all coexist all the time. So an ideal state is where you have Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in good state. And that ideal state doesn't mean that you will feel like you're a superman or woman. It just means that if an external stimulus comes and hit you, it almost serves the function of a tripod. 3 legs, very well placed and quite equally balanced. That external stimulus, whether it's a virus or bad food or stress, anything hits you, there's a very less chance that you will trip and fall. You will still stay stable. That's the ideal state. And in that ideal state, all 3 doshas coexist in proper balance. I hope when I explain a little bit about each dosha and how they manifest in terms of quality, it might make more sense.
Okay, great. And then Elizabeth says, can one's dosha evolve throughout one's life owing to, different stages of life?
Definitely. So there is a sloka, a Sanskrit sloka. I will say that very quickly. Vayo aho ratri bhukta anda te anda madhya adika kramat, which means vaya means age, aho means day, time of the day, ratri means time of the night, bhukta means you're eating. These 4 factors change your dosha every time. With age, you start everybody starts with the kapha predominance, because in childhood, remember, kapha is nourishment. You have to grow faster, and nourishment is the focus. You go from kapha in the middle age, you will go through pitta, and as age progresses, most of the symptoms will be that most of us experience will be related to bones and joints and degeneration, which is vata. So by age, with age, definitely it changes with the time of the day and night, which nowadays we understand as the circadian rhythm, we change. And we also change with our diet. As soon as we eat, there will be an impact of that food. And yes, you have identified what Acharya said.
Great.
We do change.
But now I'm confused, but you're predominant, you're born one that stays the same, right?
So you're born one stays the same. Only meaning of this is that if somebody is born as a kapha tendency person, as the age progresses, the risk of getting joint related issues or more of those degenerative conditions are not very high compared to a person who is already vata by birth. The nature is vata. As the age progresses, most of the pitta symptoms becomes quite not that strong. Kapha also will be quite weak, but as age progresses, vata symptoms will be, we can anticipate and need to take extra precautions to prevent that.
That's very interesting then. So by knowing what our prevalent dosha is, we can then anticipate what we're prone to in terms of illnesses.
That's the whole idea.
Action. Oh, amazing. It's taken that long for it to make So, okay, let's talk about should we do a quick thing on the doshas then, the different doshas?
Yeah, I will quickly explain each dosha type. So I generally don't explain them as a personality itself. I will explain mostly as qualities, which in my way of thinking, it makes more sense, and it's also quite easy to practically apply. When we talk, let's talk about each dosha. So when we talk about Vata dosha, you already explained that it's representing air and space, and hence it is mostly manifesting in our body in terms of functions through our movement related functions. So bones and joints, nervous system, any kind of impulsive thinking, all of that. So what we understand in terms of quality, how do we understand Vata is predominant in our body, is the specific quality of air and space. Air and space is generally dry and cold in nature. So that manifests within our body. So Vata tendency person, like I described earlier, might feel cold very easily. There will be tendency towards, say, slightly lower blood pressure, tendency for feeling lightheadedness and cramps, or tendency for cramps within the body. Again, dryness can manifest anywhere in the body in any form. So it doesn't mean just dryness in the skin. Sometimes it manifests as clicking sounds from the joints, or dry eyes, or dryness within any part of the body where there's skin or mucous membrane. So all of that we understand as cold and dry qualities of Vata. So when somebody is a combination of any dosha type also, you're not worried about Vata predominant and Vata pacifying food. You are actually focused on reducing that coldness and reducing or helping the circulation, and also taking care of that dryness. And it's also very important that I explain that coldness doesn't mean that your temperature drops, because all of us are exactly that supposed to be 36.7 unless we have fever or something going on. That temperature doesn't change, but still some of us actually feel quite cold easily. And that has nothing to do with temperature itself. There's more to do with movement, or movement of temperature, how temperature moves from your core and your muscles to your extremities with the help of blood circulation. When circulation is inefficient, then you feel coldness. And that's what we understand as a Vata impact on it. And Vata can also cause food to move too slow through our gut, causing it to be dry and impacted, and cause constipation tendency. It can cause bloatedness because of this slowness in the movement. So all of these are what we understand as Vata nature. If you have a predominance, you might experience some of these, and you will also notice what I said about craving and affinity. You'll naturally notice that you have an affinity towards warm and warming food. So it could be teas, warming spices. It could be anything which has an effect of warming up the body. Vata also tends to um, feel more comfortable with healthy oils. So food which is made of healthy oils will digest very well and feel quite good in terms of its effect in Vata. Vata in terms of mind tends to be quite active and quite influenced by the external environment. It's in nature to think out of the box. So it's quite natural for Vata tendency person to have creative interests or creative activities that they do with their work in some form. And sometimes it's actually, I've started actually recommending, if you're a Vata person, to find time to do something creative, because a lot of people have lost that from their routine, and that itself feels like an anxiousness within, because sometimes the process of letting go and dealing with stress, that coping mechanism is quite well connected with our experiences and our expressions, and sometimes creative expressions are quite good. So Vata tendency is naturally creative, naturally a bit anxious, and worrying nature. It doesn't mean it's bad or anything. It just means that the person will be a bit more receptive, quick to sort of feel before anyone else, and will be naturally more creative. That's what we understand as a Vata predominant personality type: dry, cold, affinity to warm, and a creative sort of mind. Um, Hope that makes sense. If we
Yeah.
look at Pitta,
Can I
Pitta
just
is
ask
like I
quickly?
mentioned.
Can I just ask quickly when we finish the dosha? So with Vata, so you've given the advice. So if you're a Vata, then you should actually eat warming foods, and you should find time for creative pursuits and these things. So the things that you're naturally affiliated with, you need to honor, basically.
Yes, as a part of maintaining your balance and health,
Okay.
these are all techniques that you naturally develop due to your
Yeah.
tendency within.
Yeah.
So going to Pitta dosha, Pitta is fire. What we see as predominant quality of Pitta is heat, and heat is not just feeling of warmth or sweating very easily. Those are not always visible. Pitta is mostly visible, as I mentioned. Most of symptoms will be digestive, so acid reflux or burning sensation, discomfort with food which are uh, too spicy or acidic, like vinegar or alcohol, dark chocolate, things like that. If it is disturbing the digestive system, that is sort of understood as a sign that the nature is towards Pitta. There could be similarly an affinity towards colder things. When I say colder, it's not just the temperature. So fruits and fresh vegetables and things which are not fully cooked, so raw vegetables, things like that, feels quite good in terms of digestion compared to like a curry or something which is prepared with spices and other warming things. Mind is quite peculiar in Pitta, that it's quite focused and analytical, logical in nature, tends to be a bit reactive as well, like fire. So if there is some reasons, I can see Stella smiling. You can react quite intensely, but the benefit of Pitta is that you focus more on the problem and solution, and it's a little bit more easier to let go. Maybe not easy for another person to experience because it's a outburst sometimes, but it is quite not an unhealthy sort of behavior. It's the natural tendency to be expressive and a bit reactive. It's a fire within. Like Vata tendency, the benefit in terms of diet, it should be focused on cooling aspects. When I say cooling, again, we understand in every category of fruits, grains, nuts and seeds, vegetables, there are food groups which are acidic or heaty in nature and cooling in nature. So it's not about avoiding all kinds of, say, nuts and seeds, or it's not avoiding all kinds of, or just having fruits and vegetables. Say, for example, in grains, rice and oats are considered to be cooling and quite good for Pitta dosha. Compared to wheat or corn, these are considered to be quite acidic and heaty. And nowadays, there are lots of evidence in terms of researches which shows that these may increase inflammation tendency, which in our terms is Pitta as a nature. And Pitta, like I said just now, there is a tendency for inflammation. So we usually advise to keep an eye out for any acidic symptoms, headaches, any recurrent infections or UTI, any kind of skin eruptions. All of that indicates that there is something wrong in terms of the diet and routine, which is contributing towards that, and some actions needs to be taken to avoid it going into something even more deeper. The third dosha, kapha, is like I said, it is earth and water, the heavier aspects. We also mentioned it's related to nourishment. So kapha tendency person generally has a tendency to gain weight a bit more easily, and they are quite well built. It's not unhealthy as such, but there is always a tendency to gain weight quite easily. And it's a personality type where you can look at food which are kapha increasing, like milk containing products or heavy grains and sugary things or processed food. You will immediately gain weight. That's a kapha tendency. In Vata, it takes much more effort to gain weight. And in fact, sometimes in Vata tendency, you can lose weight quite easily if you are not careful with the diet and routine. Kapha tendency also particularly have a symptom of, because of that oiliness that comes from kapha, there is an easy tendency to get respiratory illnesses, something which we focused a lot during this pandemic. How to minimize the impact of any respiratory illness will be to take care that you are not having a diet which is predominant in kapha or mucousy nature. So avoid too much of cheese and other milk products, especially too late in the day, just before going to bed. If you're drinking milk or having a food which has cheese and heavy mucousy food with grains, say for example a pasta with a sauce prepared out of cheese, that can increase mucousy tendency and put you at an extra risk. And if you're a kapha tendency person, that kind of a diet is not suitable for you at all. Kapha would benefit from warming spices in the diet, similar to like Vata, but with less of oils and heavy ingredients. So light preparations with less oil, lots of vegetables, but preferably cooked and warm, will suit kapha tendency. In terms of mind, kapha is quite like earth, steady and stable. And at the same time, the drawback would be kapha tends to be stubborn. It's very hard to convince and make a person understand something new, because you hold on to different ideas and memories quite well. And kapha can have a tendency to react much slowly to anything that's happening in the environment, which means that it's not a drawback, or it's just a nature. We have to identify these, and then we advise a kapha tendency person will be the last person to decide and go out for a run, but would benefit the most by doing that. And Vata tendency person, because of that dryness tendency and tendency for degeneration or repeated stress injuries, is the last person we recommend to go out for a run, but will be the first one to definitely do that, because it feels quite good to move and feel the freshness and the environment. But it might be beneficial to do the opposite, more gentle strength building activities and lots of warm up, followed by some cardio, whereas kapha would benefit from a lot of cardio. And yeah, the focus changes according to your body type as well. So when you identify your body type using the questionnaire, if you are not suffering from any major illnesses or taking any medication, etc., you can just focus on what is your major dosha, what's predominant one. The questionnaire shows you if there is two dosha also, because you're looking at dry, oily, cold, and hot. You can see which of the qualities is predominant and just focus on reducing that. So if heat is much higher, and there is also an aspect of oiliness, the body type will show as Pitta Kapha, but the predominant symptom that is visible is the higher heat tendency or expression of that. So Pitta should be focused most and avoid any heavy food at night. And if you're Vata Pitta, similarly include healthy oils in your diet and avoid anything which is too acidic in nature. So prefer more sort of, say if you're having a salad, or salad dressing should be ideally something more simpler, say lemon juice and olive oil, rather than putting something which has vinegar in it or making it too acidic, and avoid too much spices. When I say spices, it's not about the flavorful spices. You can still use fennel and cardamom and cumin, all of that, but avoid chili and too much of hot pepper. If you have with the tendency with a combination of Vata, you will benefit from some digestive spices. Don't avoid all of it.
Gosh, I've got to tell everybody, this stuff really does work. I can tell you this from my personal experience.
When Stella approached me, I was telling Stella that I could talk as long as you want. I'll keep talking. So I think we are talking a lot. I'm sorry.
But I just want to say, I first got exposure to Ayurveda when I went on Ayurvedic retreats, of course, and then you have this very intense treatment plan, which is tailored to you, and they're giving you treatments and massages with medicated oils that are specific to you in terms of your dosha, and the food is specific to your dosha and everything else. And I've done a lot of different kind of healing modalities through my work, of course, but I've never felt as good as I have done having done an Ayurvedic retreat. I really, really did. I always struggled when I came back, though, because it just felt like, oh, what do I do now? I don't know what to do. They were giving me all these great treatments and giving me all these massages. The thing I did start to learn, though, was to start to really be aware, and you taught me this, be aware of your own body and how you react to certain foods and how you react to certain things. And it's not like a one size fits all, like you read, this diet and this way of living. And so it's really experimenting to see what how it affects you. And I learned, being very predominantly Pitta person, that these spices did affect me, but I could have cardamom and I could have star anise and I could have the more cooling spices, which I actually love. And I did used to have a lot of heartburn, but I changed my diet and all of that to really reduce the inflammation. I'm just very, you can see I'm very passionate about this subject because it really did make a difference to me and my lifestyle. And I know there's so much more I need to learn about it. We all need to learn. I mean, the herbs, we haven't even touched on that. Ashwagandha and all these amazing herbs that maybe you'll come back and talk to us about another time.
I think, when it comes to application, you have to embed small changes rather than aim for the whole thing. That is sort of a pathway to feeling unsatisfied. I was not able to do everything. It's the whole idea is to form a routine and then embed into your routine. Say if you have a tea in the morning or a coffee in the morning, how you can substitute that same drink and have it in the same cup at the same time, but then you add bits into it and it feels much more natural and easy to do. What I focus here in my practice also last 5 years is just small changes. And it's so fascinating how people continue for many, many years, these small changes, and see how it's almost like you becoming your own doctor. That's the best way to explain it. Understand your body better and make your own diagnosis, make your own treatment. And this is for prevention. This is not for major illnesses, but how to actually take care of that starting bits.
Yeah, it's really, really good advice. Thank you. But I think with if you have something which like a chronic condition, or even if you just want to, I guess, rejuvenate yourself and learn more about your own lifestyle, people can come and see you on your private practice, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
at the moment it's all online, so wherever
Yeah.
you are, it's quite easy.
It's okay. It's okay. And share with us your website. I can just put it up here.
It's ayurdoctor.co.uk. Maybe I can also
type it up there. Yeah, type it in there. So if anybody wants to, and his website's very good as well, just generally good resource.
Yeah,
And
it has a blog as well, which I very, very seldom update, but it has some.
you don't need to. It's got some really good information in there. Really good. So thank you so much for tackling the subject of doshas. As everyone can see, it's very detailed. We just touched the surface, and there's so much more we could talk about, and maybe one day we can get you back and we can continue. And then just to say, when people come see you, then you prescribe herbs and you do a whole plan for the individual, right?
Yeah, mainly resetting their routine.
Yeah.
We will focus on cleansing and detoxification using herbs, or sometimes it can be a fasting routine. Could be anything based on what is their current situation. And mainly we start with complex medicines, combinations. Those taste horrible, to things that you can do yourself through teas and or self oil application, etc., etc. So we end up in a middle path. I start my way, and then we'll end up something that you can do yourself to maintain.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Mathew. It's been a pleasure to have you and hear all this great wisdom.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you.
I know we touched upon a lot of things. It's very hard to fully explain the science and the concept in any amount of time. I still learn while I'm practicing, but I hope I could give you either a bit of motivation to learn more, or some small bits to apply yourself. Both of these, if any of these have happened, I feel myself it was worth the experience of speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So nice to see everybody. Have a wonderful week ahead. Be well. Empower yourselves. Keep yourselves healthy and happy. And next week we have something completely different. It's a morning session next week. It's at 10 a.m. We have a pelvic floor exercise class. Okay, so which will be very interesting by I think one of the girls who's doing it is physio. And anyway, it's going to be really good. So I'll send you details of that during the week. And have a great week ahead. Lovely to see you all. And Dr. Mathew, one more time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye all. Bye.